Thank you so much for being here today. What I want to do this afternoon is something that is very radical. Ready for some radical activity? We're going to practice democracy. How's that? And what I'm going to try to do is to talk with you about my views as to what are the major issues facing our country. And after I stop, hopefully there's a microphone around here someplace and you'll ask me questions and we'll go on from there. If you were to ask me the most serious problem facing our country, what I would tell you is that we don't discuss the most serious problems facing our country. Increasingly, what we see from media's perspective is that politics is like a baseball game, picking winners and losers and how much money people are raising and dumb things they're saying, and it's about the candidates. Politics is not about the candidates. It's about you, and it's about your kids, and it's about your parents. So what we need to do as a nation is to hold thousands of meetings like this in every state in the country where people come out and say, look, these are the issues that I am concerned about. And we've got to work together to figure out how we solve those issues. You are here today because you love this country and you are patriotic Americans who understand that if we give up on democracy, if we don't vote, if we don't participate, we are turning our backs on men and women who died to defend American democracy, and we are not going to do that. So let me just touch on some of the issues that I think are important as I go around the country. And the first issue is the fact that today in America, we live in a nation which is the wealthiest nation today in the history of the world. But most Americans don't feel that wealth because almost all of that wealth rests in the hands of a handful of billionaires and wealthy people. And that is something that has got to change. My Republican friends worry very much about distribution of wealth. And yet, what the reality is that in the last 30 years in this country, there has been a huge redistribution of wealth. Unfortunately, that redistribution has gone in the wrong direction. Between 1985 and 2013, the bottom 90% of our people lost over $10 trillion in wealth if income and wealth distribution had remained the same. Meanwhile, the top 0.1% experienced an $8 trillion increase in their percentage of wealth. So what we are saying today is that in this country, a handful of billionaires cannot have it all. Today, we have more income and wealth inequality than any major industrialized country on earth, and the gap between the very rich and everybody else is wider today than it has been at any time since 1929. In my view, the issue of wealth and income inequality is the great moral issue of our time. It is the great economic issue of our time and the great political issue of our time, and we have got to address it. profoundly wrong when today the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. There is something profoundly wrong when 99% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. So what you have in Vermont, in New Hampshire, all over this country, is you have people with new technology, with increased productivity. They're working longer hours for lower wages. And yet 99% of all new income generated goes to the top 1%. From a moral perspective, what we have got to ask ourselves, are we comfortable living in a nation which has the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, at the same time as we're seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires? I am not comfortable, and I think many of you are not as well. There is something profoundly wrong in America when one family, the Walton family of Walmart, owns more wealth than the bottom 130 million Americans. One family. There is something profoundly wrong when in the last 2 years alone, the 14 wealthiest people in this country saw their wealth increase by $157 billion, which is more wealth than is owned by the bottom 40%. This type of economy is not only immoral, it is unsustainable. This type of rigged economy is not what our great country is supposed to be about. This has got to change. And as your president, together we will make it change. Not just income and wealth inequality. It is the tragic reality, and what I'm trying to do in this campaign, by the way, is just raise issues that very few people talk about and that you're not going to see on TV or in the newspapers. But here's a reality that every American has got to grapple with. Over the last 40 years, despite a huge increase in technology, despite the fact that almost all workers are producing more, the great middle class of this country is disappearing. Median family income today is almost $5,000 less than it was in 1999. Millions and millions of workers are not today working one job, they're working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs, trying to cobble together some income and some health care, and that is not what the American economy is supposed to be about. Now let me say a word about unemployment. Are we better off today than we were when George W. Bush left office? Absolutely. But anyone who thinks that we are where we should be is terribly mistaken. When you look at the newspapers at the end of the month, at the beginning of the month, they will tell you what unemployment is. And they will say, well, unemployment is 5.4%. Wrong. If you look at real unemployment, according to government statistics, real unemployment, including those people who have given up looking for work, and including people who are working part-time, and many of the new jobs being created are part-time jobs, you add all of that together, real unemployment is close to 11%. Now here's an issue we don't discuss at all. Youth unemployment. What about the kids who are graduating high school? What about the kids who have dropped out of high school? Their unemployment is, conservatively speaking, 17%. African American youth unemployment is literally off the charts. The truth is today that not only do we have high unemployment, we have 45 million Americans living in poverty, many of them who are working at low-wage jobs that do not sustain their families. I have seen, you have seen, people going to emergency food depositories where they get emergency food shelters because their income simply does not allow them to feed their kids. Imagine that, working 40 hours a week and not having enough money to feed your kids. So what we have got to do, in the essence of this campaign, and we've got to think hard about doing it, it's not so easy. How do we create an economy which works for the middle class and working families of this country rather than the top 1%? That's our job. Creating an economy that works for ourselves, our kids, our parents, so that everybody in this country has a fair shake and not an economy in which 99% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Now, when you talk about income and wealth inequality, that issue spills over to another issue, which is of huge, huge consequence. And let me be as blunt as I can and tell you what you already know. As a result of the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the American political system has been totally corrupted and the foundations of American democracy are being undermined. What the Supreme Court, by a 5-4 decision, essentially said is they said to the wealthiest people in this country, well, hey, you guys already own the American economy. We are now going to give you the opportunity to own the United States government and state governments throughout this country. And that is precisely what they are trying to do. In my view, American democracy is not about billionaires being able to buy candidates and elections. It is not about the Koch brothers, Sheldon Adelson, and other incredibly wealthy individuals spending billions of dollars to elect candidates who will make the rich richer and everybody else poorer. If you can believe this, and this is where we are, the Koch brothers themselves, one family, second wealthiest in America, will spend more money in this election cycle than either the Democratic or Republican Party will spend. Brothers and sisters, this is not democracy, this is oligarchy, and we have got to change that. And in New Hampshire and throughout New England, we know what democracy is about. We have town meetings. People come out, they raise their voices, they vote, they ask questions. One person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. And I have said it and I'll repeat it again, that if elected president, I will have a litmus test for my nominees to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they will vote to overturn Citizens United. When we talk about our responsibilities as citizens, as human beings, as parents, and I've got 4 kids and 7 grandchildren, there is nothing more important than leaving this country and the entire planet in a way that is habitable for our children and grandchildren. That is a moral responsibility that we have as human beings. The debate is over The scientific community has spoken in a virtually unanimous voice. And what they have told us is that climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, and it is already causing devastating problems in the United States and around the world. And what the scientists are telling us is that if we do not boldly transform our energy system away from fossil fuels and into energy efficiency and sustainable energies, this planet, by the end of this century, could be 5 to 10 degrees warmer, with a devastating impact upon the quality of life of all people throughout the world. This will mean, if we do not turn this around, more drought, more famine, more rising sea level, more floods, more ocean acidification, more extreme weather disturbances, more disease, and more human suffering. We must not, we cannot allow that to happen. It is no secret that there is massive discontent with politics in America today. In the midterm elections in November 2014, 63% of Americans did not vote, including 80% of young people. Poll after poll tells us that our citizens no longer have confidence in our political institutions, and given the power of big money, what their vote means in elections. Combating this political alienation, and all of you know it, all of you have talked to your friends, and they say, why are you going out on this beautiful day to hear somebody named Bernie Sanders from Vermont? At least you guys know where Vermont is. Many people around the country know. What are you wasting your time doing this? But it's not just... And I appreciate that. And I love you too. But here's the point, and honestly, from the bottom of my heart, this is not about Bernie Sanders. Let me tell you something. Because I work in Washington, that's my day job. And this is what I want to tell you. You can have the best president in the history of the world, somebody courageous, smart, bold. That person will not be able to address the major crises that we face unless there is a mass political movement, unless there's a political revolution in this country. What do I mean by that? What I mean is pretty simple. Is that right now, the only major pieces of legislation that get to the floor of the House and the Senate are pieces of legislation that are sanctioned and approved by corporate America, Wall Street, and the big money interests. Okay? And the only way that we beat these guys, who are incredibly powerful, they contribute huge sums of money into political campaigns. They have super PACs, where they're putting millions and tens of millions of dollars in it. They have lobbyists running all over Washington, D.C. They own much of the media. The only way we win and we transform America is when millions of people stand up, as you're doing today, and say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. This country belongs to all of us and not a handful of billionaires. I happen to like the President of the United States very much. He's a personal friend of mine. And I've known Barack Obama for many years. And I think history will judge his record a lot better than his contemporaries, understanding where we were 7 years ago when we were losing 800,000 jobs a month, when the financial system, as a result of the greed and illegal behavior of Wall Street, was on the verge of collapse, when we were running up a $1.4 trillion deficit. That's where we were. But here is the major mistake that President Obama has made. He ran in 2008, and by the way, obviously we all know the huge role that New Hampshire plays in these things. He ran a great national campaign, brilliant campaign, motivated people all over this country, young people, working people, people of color, people came together. But after he was elected, he believed that, I think it was out of the goodness of his heart in a sense, he believed that he could sit down with these right-wing Republicans and negotiate and reach some kind of compromise, when it is very clear that these Republicans, not for one instant, wanted to reach any sensible compromise. They wanted to obstruct. And that is what exists. And these guys are there not just by themselves. Behind them is unbelievable amounts of money and power. How do we beat that? How do you beat that? And maybe, let me be very honest and tell you what no candidate will tell you. It is possible that it is too late. Maybe we can't beat them. Maybe they are just too powerful. But I think your presence here, and the reason I'm running for President of the United States, is I am not going to give up. We are going to take that. Tell you with 100% certainty is the only way we defeat them is when millions of people are paying attention, when they're out on the streets, when my Republican colleagues look out the window and they say, oh my God, the American people are catching on to what we're doing. That's when, and furthermore, when we start electing to Congress people who are prepared to stand up for working families. And that's what this political revolution is about. Now, what we need is a very straightforward agenda. I mean, a series of ideas that resonate with the American people. And I want to lay out some, not all, it's not definitive, but some of the elements of an agenda that I think brings people together. What I want to also tell you, you turn on TV, they say, oh, we're a divided nation. You got half Democrat, half Republican, everybody hates each other. The truth is that on many basic economic issues, we are not a divided nation. What the Republicans believe, and their recent budget produced this, huge tax breaks for billionaires. You know what? The American people in overwhelming numbers do not believe in more tax breaks for billionaires. What the Republican budget was about is major cuts in Medicare, in Medicaid, and in education, and in health care. The American people do not agree with that. So our job, through a progressive agenda, is to bring our people together and stop having people vote against their own best interests. Take off just some of the issues that I think we need to throw out on the table, issues that we're going to have strong support across this country. When you talk to people and you say to them, what is the issue uppermost on your mind? They almost always answer with a four-letter word called jobs. And the reason for that is there is enormous economic insecurity in this country. If you're 50, 55 years of age, you're worried that you're going to be fired and replaced by somebody who is 20. If you're 20, you're having a very hard time finding a job, or finding a job that pays you decently and may have some health care. And the truth is, as I mentioned a moment ago, real unemployment is close to 11%. If we are truly serious about reversing the decline of the American middle class, we need a major federal jobs program which puts millions of Americans back to work at decent paid jobs. And at a time when our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our rail system, our airports, our levees, our dams are decaying. Our infrastructure is crumbling. The most effective way to create millions of decent paying jobs is to say right now we're going to rebuild that infrastructure and put our people back to work. I have introduced, as a senator, I have introduced legislation which would put $1 trillion into rebuilding our infrastructure over a 5-year period. It would create and maintain 13 million decent paying jobs, and as president, I will make sure that happens. And when we talk about jobs and wages, there is another issue that we have got to discuss. It's not a sexy issue. A lot of people don't know much about it. Media virtually never talks about it. And that is our disastrous trade policies. You are looking at a United States senator and former member of the House who voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, against permanent normal trade relations with China. And I'm going to do everything that I can to defeat the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think all of you know what our trade policies have been about. Maybe the young people don't, but most people who have been around for a little while remember that actually there was once a time when you went into a store and you could buy products made in the United States of America. Young people, that's true. You don't know that, but that's true. And what we have got to tell corporate America, they want us every night on TV, they advertise and say, buy this, buy that, buy that. Well, if they want us to purchase their products, how about starting to manufacture those products back here in New Hampshire and Vermont? Set of trade policies which works not just for corporate America, whose preference is to shut down plants in this country, move to low-wage countries, and bring their products back in here. We have lost, since 2001, 60,000 factories in America and millions of jobs. And that is one of the reasons that the middle class of this country is disappearing. So we're going to deal with that issue and create trade policies that work for our people and not just the CEOs. When we talk about the economy, we're not just talking about jobs. We're talking about jobs that pay people a living wage. The current federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage and must be raised to a living wage. And by the way, when I talk about grassroots activism, understand that in states and cities all over America, working people, low-income working people are going out on the streets. I march with them in D.C. and elsewhere. And what they are saying is, we can't make it on $7.25 or $8 an hour. You know what you're seeing? In states and cities around the country, governments are responding. In Los Angeles, a few weeks ago, their city council voted to raise the minimum wage over a several-year period to $15 an hour, and that is exactly where we should be going nationally. Our goal, and I don't think, sometimes people say, oh, Bernie Sanders is so radical. It is not radical to say that if somebody works 40 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty. That's common sense. That's not radical. Further, we must establish pay equity for women workers. It is unconscionable that women earn 78 cents on the dollar compared to men who perform the same work. That discrimination must end. There is one major wealthy country in the world that does not guarantee paid sick leave to its workers. You're living in that country, and that has got to end. Between you and me, if I go into a fast food restaurant, I do not want the person who's working on the food to be dealing with the flu. Thank you. All right, people when they're sick should be able to stay home and take care of their kids, by the way. Furthermore, some of you may know this is an issue we don't talk about ever. Congratulations, we live in the country where our people probably work the longest hours of any major country on earth. And yet there are jobs being advertised now that say, okay, maybe we'll give you a 1 week of paid vacation, or maybe no paid vacation at all. Imagine people being forced to work 51, 52 weeks a year, stressed out, exhausted, not having the time to spend with their families. The United States has got to join the rest of the industrialized world and guarantee decent amounts of vacation time for our working people. What are we going to do about some of these issues? Let me just tell you what my thoughts are. When we talk about income and wealth inequality, what I think many of you believe, that it is no longer acceptable for the billionaires and the millionaires of this country and for large multinational corporations to avoid paying their fair share of profits, of their fair share of taxes. They're making the profits, now they got to pay their taxes on those profits. These large corporations are stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens. We are losing as a nation over $100 billion a year. In any given year, there are major profitable corporations who make billions of dollars who pay zero in taxes. We have a situation where Warren Buffett, one of the wealthiest people in the world, reminds us that his effective real tax rate is lower than that of his secretary or truck drivers or nurses. What we are saying to the billionaire class is that they cannot take advantage of all of the benefits of being American while refusing to accept their responsibilities. That's got to end. We have enormous unmet needs in this country, and we need increased revenue, and people who are making out like bandits are going to have to help us address those needs. Now, there is another issue out there, and that is when you talk about illegal behavior, when you talk about recklessness, when you talk about irresponsibility, these are just other words to describe Wall Street. In my view, it is time to break up the largest financial institutions in this country. We have today 6 major financial institutions which, when their assets are added up, are equivalent to about 60% of the gross domestic product of the United States. They issue most of the mortgages and a lot of the credit cards in this country as well. In my view, Wall Street cannot continue to be an island unto itself, gambling trillions in risky financial instruments while expecting you and the people of this country to bail them out. Wow! If a bank is too big to fail, that bank is too big to exist. We need a banking system which is pumping money and providing affordable loans to small businesses, to people who want to purchase homes, who are part of the productive economy, not a banking system which exists only for itself and for its own profits. Now, when we talk about how we move this country forward, as I mentioned a moment ago at the very top of the list, if you're concerned about health care, if you're concerned about education, if you're concerned about the environment and climate change, we have got to be concerned about campaign finance. We have got to overturn Citizens United, and in my view, we have got to move toward public funding of elections. I want to see an American political system in which everybody, regardless of their political views, who is interested in public service, is able to run for office. And I want to see those people be able to run for public office without begging money from wealthy people or from corporations. And I want to encourage young people. You know, I know it's very easy to beat up on politicians and politics, but that's what democracy is about. I want more and more people to participate in it, to run for office. That's why I think we need public funding. Today, some of you know this and some of you don't, but the United States of America is the only major industrialized country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right. Despite the gains of the Affordable Care Act, some 35 million Americans continue to lack health insurance, and many more, including many in this room today, are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments. Yet, despite a dysfunctional healthcare system, which, by the way, does not do as well as many other countries in terms of longevity, how long we live, infant mortality, and other healthcare issues, despite all of that, we are spending almost twice as much per person on healthcare as do the people of other countries. This is absurd. In my view, we need a universal health care system guaranteeing health care for all people. And we need that system, quality health care for all, to be cost effective. The only way I know that we do that is through a Medicare for all single payer program. Now here is another issue where the United States, what we're doing is so crazy it is hard to understand. It really is. Just take a deep breath and think about this. Everybody in this room knows that we live in a highly competitive global economy. And everybody knows that if we're going to succeed in this competitive global economy, we need the best educated workforce possible, right? Yeah! And on top of that, all of us know that education, learning, is an inherent part of what being human is about. We want to keep learning throughout our entire lives. And yet what we have today is a situation in where hundreds of thousands of bright and qualified young people are no longer able to dream about going to college because they can't afford that. And it is not only grossly unfair to those young people, because we have cut their ladder to the middle class. We removed that ladder. But furthermore, it is crazy for the economic future of our country. We need more scientists and engineers and doctors and teachers and police officers. We desperately need these people. And to say to hundreds of thousands of young people, sorry, you're not going to get the education you need, is so counterproductive to the future of this country. It is hard to imagine that we have allowed it to occur. And then on top of that, we have millions of young and middle-aged people paying off these incredibly oppressive student debts. I just talked, a half hour before I walked in here, just talked to a young woman who is a teacher, and obviously in our society today we desperately need good teachers. And her crime for wanting to get a master's degree was that she is now $200,000 in debt and paying interest rates of between 6 and 9%. I talked to a young woman in Burlington, Vermont, maybe a year ago. And her crime in life is she wanted to be and is a doctor, primary care physician treating low-income people, exactly the kind of doctors that we need. She is $300,000 in debt. We have a major crisis in terms of affordable, accessible dental care in this country. All right? People can't find dentists that they can afford. We need tens of thousands of dentists. I was in Iowa last week. A young woman came up to me and said, I'm graduating dental school this week, $400,000 in debt. Okay? All of this stuff is crazy stuff. And by that I mean it's not just unfair to the individual, it is counterproductive to where we need to go as a nation. And that is why I have recently introduced legislation that says two basic things. Number one, public colleges, every public college and public university in America will be tuition free. And number two, we're going to end the absurdity by which people today are paying 6 or 9% interest rates on student debt. At the same time, they can refinance their home for 2 or 3%. So we're going to allow people to refinance their debt at a lower interest rate. And then on top of that, what Obama did, which was a step forward, he said, look, I don't want the banks making profit off of student debt. We'll have the government do that. Well, I think, between you and me, the government should not be making billions of dollars of profit on debt being paid by low-income and middle-class families. We're going to get the government out of making profits on student debt. And when we do that, we can lower interest rates by at least half. That will be a big step forward for the people of this country. In America today, we have 45 million people living in poverty. We have 35 million people who have no health insurance. We have hundreds of thousands who cannot afford to go to college. We have people working incredibly long hours for low wages. We are seeing an increase in senior poverty, and many seniors in this country are trying to get by on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 Social Security. I frankly don't know how they do that. And how they do that is by, not heating up their homes in the winter or, buying the medicine that they need or buying the food they need. That's how they get by. And I think what we have got to say as a nation is that is not acceptable. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world, and our seniors should not be having to make a choice between food and medicine. I am the ranking member, which means the leader of the opposition on the Senate Budget Committee. So I've worked on the budget issue quite a lot. Now, you don't know it because I don't think the media did much in the way of reporting it, but I want to tell you what the budget was that passed the U.S. Congress last month. This is what it did. At a time when we have 35 million Americans without any health insurance, the Republican budget terminated the Affordable Care Act and made massive cuts in Medicaid. The result of that is they threw in their budget 27 million Americans off of health insurance. That was their proposal that they give to the appropriations committees. Okay? At a time when millions of working class families are trying to figure out how they're going to send their kids to college, and when the Pell Grant program is the major source of federal funding for those families, Republicans over a 10-year period cut Pell Grants by $90 billion. At a time when we have families in New Hampshire, in Vermont, all across this country, who are struggling in terms of figuring out how they're going to put food on their table for their kids. Republican budget made massive cuts in nutrition programs, food stamps, etc., and even the WIC program, which provides nutrition to low-income pregnant women and little babies. And in the midst of that budget, while they cut food for hungry kids, they did manage to provide over $200 billion in tax breaks for the wealthiest 0.2% by repealing the estate tax. So what we say to our Republican friends, that is not the America that we believe in. What we believe is that all of our people should have at least a minimum and dignified standard of living. The Republican candidates for president, whether it is Jeb Bush or Rick Perry or whoever they are, Chris Christie, one of their key planks is to cut Social Security. And what we say to them is not only are you not going to cut Social Security, we are going to expand Social Security. And when you see somebody on TV telling you that Social Security is going broke, tell them, or at least yell at the television, and tell them that ain't true. Social Security has $2.5 trillion in the trust fund, can pay out every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 18 years. And when they tell you Social Security is responsible for our deficit, or has added to our deficit, tell them that's not true either, because as all of you know, Social Security is funded independently through the payroll tax. We have introduced legislation, and as president, I will fight hard to make this law that extends Social Security for another 30 to 40 years on top of the 18 and expands benefits. And you know how we do that? We scrap the cap that currently exists. What that means, not everybody knows what that means. What that means right now is you got somebody here making $10 million a year, somebody here making $118,000. Both of those people are contributing the same exact amount of money into the Social Security Trust Fund. And you don't even have to start at $119,000. You could start at $250,000. You lift the cap on top of that. We will have Social Security extended for decades and be able to expand benefits. Let me conclude just saying. First of all, thank you. This is a fantastic turnout.
Thank you.
Last week and a half, I was in Concord. We were in Concord. We were in Epping, and we were in Portsmouth. We had huge turnout. So let me tell you a secret. We're going to win New Hampshire. Without your help. And the help that I need, you know New Hampshire better than we do. We're just staffing up now, and I would urge everybody who wants to be part of the campaign, go to our website, berniesanders.com, and we'll figure out how we can best utilize people. But look, once people get mobilized, and once people get actively involved in the political process, and once people begin to stand up, we can win. We can win not only New Hampshire, not only Iowa, but more importantly, far more importantly, is we can transform America. My message today is do not think small, think big. In this sense, do not get yourself involved in a debate which says, well, choices in front of us is whether we cut education by 6% or 3%. And the liberals say only 3%. Okay? Or whether we cut Social Security by this or cut Social Security by that. I want you to appreciate and believe in your hearts that we can transform America in a way that says that healthcare is a right of all people, and we're going to do that. That we're going to have the best child care system in the world, so when working moms and dads go to work, they know that the people who are taking care of their kids are well trained and well paid. That we're going to have the best public education system in the world because we respect education, we respect our teachers. That our young people, that the idealism of our young people are going to lead us in a way that makes our country lead the world in transforming our energy system and combating climate change. And that we are going to restore America to a vigorous democracy. Look, we all have friends who disagree with us politically. That's called democracy. We treat people civilly. We respect other people's point of view. But I don't want to see a country in which 80% of young people do not vote in elections. I do not want to see a country where a handful of billionaires buy elections. So we've got to work together to create the vibrant political system that we need in America. So I look forward, and thank you so much for being out here today. We're going to be doing town meetings like this all over the state. We are going to be doing a lot of door knocking, a lot of telephone calling. We have a very active social media program as well. So work with us and help us make the political revolution of 2015. Thanks very much. Bill, you're going left. Outside. Sam, where are you? Sam is right there. Raise your hand. We'll go from side to side. Okay, Sam, you got a question right here, I think. No, go take the mic, stand up, tell us who you are.
Senator Sanders, what can we do to help you defeat the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Okay, you can make sure, sadly, it passed the Senate. You got 2 representatives in the U.S. House. Yes, I don't know how they're voting, but make sure they vote against it.
I saw you speak a few weeks ago at what was a privilege then, and it's a privilege now. My question is, it seems like now that you've declared your candidacy, the biggest threat to that candidacy is mainstream media trying to paint you as illegitimate or a fringe candidate, which is patently false. How do you intend to combat that, and how would you have us combat that?
Okay. Look, let's be clear. I think, you know, there's some great writers, and every now and then there's good stuff on TV. Very long periods of time. But just to give you an example about something. You asked me about the TPP. To the best of my knowledge, it may have changed in the last few days. In terms of ABC, CBS, and NBC national news, do you know how much time has been devoted to the TPP? 0. Not a minute. Not a whole lot of time is devoted to Citizens United and what that is doing to our country. So you have a media, number one, the national media, not necessarily local media, but the national media, which is corporately owned, which of course has its agenda. And then what you also have is a culture now in media, which, as I mentioned earlier, treats politics not as how we deal with the issues facing our country. That's what politics is about. That's what democracy is about. People may disagree, but let's lay the issues out on the table and have that discussion. How does it happen that despite increased technology and productivity, the middle class of this country has been disappearing for 40 years? Is that a reasonable question? Yeah. Now, people may have differences of opinion, but that's the issue we have to discuss. It's not something that the corporate media is particularly interested in. What they see is not only somebody like me as a quote-unquote marginal candidate, but what they see also is politics as a game. So if I were to slip walking out of here on a banana peel, that would be the major story of this event. That's true. That would be the picture in the paper. Okay? And what we have got to do, and the role that you have got to play, is to demand local and national media to start focusing on the real issues. Now, you ask me, how do we defeat this idea that I am a quote-unquote fringe candidate? You've done that today. I don't know this to be a fact, but I know when we were in Iowa, we had crowds even larger than this. I don't know how many people, we had 500, 600 people. We had 700 people coming out, and what the media said, those were the largest turnouts of any candidate in Iowa. I don't know what the turnouts are for Chris Christie and Jeb Bush and the other quote-unquote major candidates. I'd be surprised if they bring out as many people as we have today. That's how we do it.
Senator, thank you so much for being here today. Kath Allen from Peterborough. How do you plan to augment the cuts? They're talking about making major cuts to Medicare and privatization, etc. How do you plan to augment the cuts to those on Social Security who are barely surviving financially now? And when I say you, I'm talking about Congress.
Right. Okay. Here's where we're at. What the budget does is give an overall number to the Appropriations Committee. It says the Appropriation Committee, you have X billions of dollars, and the Republican budget is terrible. That's what it is. The best ace in the hole that we have right now, the major hope that we have, is to make sure that the president makes it clear that he's going to veto every piece of legislation that is going to make draconian cuts for the people of this country, okay? So these bills now go to the various committees. And we have got to, and we're working on it, to tell the president, and so far I think he's been agreeable to this, to say to the Republicans, sorry, you're not going to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut Medicare, Medicaid, and education. And in terms of Social Security, what I will tell you is that the senior groups in this country, the AARP, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security, gave us 2 million signatures on petitions. And the Republicans, if they want to go forward in this direction, and I don't think they will be doing it at great, great political risk. All right? So I think we're going to beat them back on Social Security, and if the president is prepared to veto, we will vote to sustain those vetoes.
Thank you. I'm happy to say I'm from Vermont. I voted for you in every election you've run for since you started running for statewide office. You mentioned that people vote against their best interests, and they seem to be voting overwhelmingly Republican. Why? What are some of the reasons that they do that?
Okay, good question, excellent question. And here's what it's about. People in this country are very angry. And you know what? We have a right to be angry. We have a right to ask why workers, in some cases, are earning hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year less in inflation adjusted for dollars than they used to. We have a right to ask how it is that people don't have health insurance, can't afford to send their kids to college. And what Republicans have done, in a very clever way, is develop wedge issues that tap into that angle. So what they say to some guy who's working longer hours for low wages, they say, you know what, maybe it's a black worker who's taking your job, who's competing with you. Or maybe it's immigration. Or what about gay rights? Or what about climate change and all this stuff? What they do is deflect attention away from the major economic issues facing our country. Or maybe it's guns, or whatever it may be. And what our job is to say to those people, look, you disagree with me on a woman's right to choose. I have a 100% lifetime record on that. That's my view, and it can You disagree with me on the issue of gay marriage. I've been one of the leaders in the Congress in protecting gay rights. You can even disagree with me on climate change, which I think is a planetary crisis. But please, our message to these people is do not vote against your own kids and your parents. How are you voting for people who are prepared to cut your mom's Social Security? Why are you voting for people who will make it impossible for you to send your kids to college or have decent child care? Why are you voting for people who are going to make it harder for you to feed your family, who are going to send your jobs to China? Now, the answer to that is that in large parts of this country, sad to say, people have never heard a progressive message. You go to large parts of this country, what they hear is Rush Limbaugh and Fox TV, okay? And also, I must tell you, and I feel very strongly about this, Democrats have made a huge mistake by not developing a 50-state strategy. What the Democrats have done is abdicate, basically put up a white flag in many, many states around the country. They're not competing, they're not bringing forth progressive ideas, they're not recruiting good candidates. So all that people hear is Rush Limbaugh and right-wing candidates. We have got to challenge these right-wing Republicans in every state in this country. Because at the end of the day, you go out to any state, and you ask somebody, stop people on a street corner and say, do you believe that we should give huge tax breaks to billionaires, cut Social Security and Medicare, and send our jobs to China? You're not going to find 5% of the people who believe that that agenda makes sense. That, in fact, is what the Republican agenda is, and we've got to expose that agenda all over America, and I intend to do just that.
Can I give a brief organizing message?
Yeah, Phil wants to say a word about how you can get involved.
So I work for the Senator, Phil, and this is a great turnout. And as the Senator said, we can win New Hampshire, but we're going to need your help. This is, we're not funded by the billionaires. You know that. We're a people-powered campaign. So just a couple things. For those of you who want to get in and make this happen, BernieSanders.com. Go to the webpage. Make sure you sign up there. BernieSanders.com. That's real important. We have an organizer here with the campaign who's in New Hampshire, Kurt Ehrenberg right there. Please get in touch with Kurt. It's Kurt@BernieSanders.com. So email Kurt and he can put you to work. The other thing is, for those of you who have cell phones, real easy to do. Just text the number 82623. So take your cell phones out and just text Bernie in your message. Just write Bernie and text it to the number 82623. You say, well, what's that going to do? that is going to get you messages about what's going on with the campaign. You'll know when Bernie's going to be in your area. Any new happenings with the campaign, you'll get a text to let you know what's going on. And the other thing is, we have sign-up sheets in the back. If you didn't sign up when you came in, please sign up when you leave. We have contribution envelopes there. We really need your financial support. We're doing well in terms of the number of contributions. We're averaging about $40 in contribution. We've had over 100,000, so we would really appreciate your help on that front. So that's the end of my my advertisement here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, Mr. Sanders. I'm a big supporter. One of my questions is about healthcare, and I've seen a lot of your posts on social media about Finland and Germany and those countries, and how they have programs for addiction. So instead of facing jail time and wasting the money there, they get healthcare. So how could we model, our healthcare in America, which is it's a much bigger country, of course. How can we model after that?
Thank you for that question. Excellent question. Very often, I don't want to go on forever in my speech, and I leave out important issues, and you guys are helping me get into that. When we look at what goes on in America, one of the tragedies is that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. Did you know that? Nothing to applaud about it. It's the cry of it. I know. But we got to get that out there. I know that. And here's the story. It is disgraceful. And we have seen in recent years a huge increase in the number of people in jail. And it is bad for everybody. It is especially bad for minorities, the African American community, and the Hispanic community. In fact, there was according to the NAACP, I think, the estimate is, if you can believe it, and just think what it means, what kind of tragedy we are talking about. A black male baby born today, if we don't turn this around, stands a 1 in 3 chance of ending up in the penal system in America. So what do we have to do? Well, first of all, you raised the issue of mental health, which is exactly right. That is a major crisis in America. I can tell you, and I think probably every other member of Congress can tell you the same thing. We get calls in our office, and the call comes, and somebody says, tell Senator Sanders that I worry very much that my brother is going to do something terrible to himself or to somebody else. We have desperately tried to get him into some mental health. We can't find the mental health that we need at a price that we can afford. That is crazy stuff. So we need a revolution in health care, which makes health care of all kinds accessible to people so they can walk in the door when they need it, mental health or non-mental health. Second of all, what we know, you talk to any police officer, you know what we do with people who are severely mentally ill in this country too often? We put them in jail. That's what we do. What sense is that? What sense is that? So we need to rethink our whole criminal justice system. We should not be arresting and incarcerating people for nonviolent crimes. Got to rethink the war on drugs. But basically, to answer your question, we need to treat people who are ill, whether it's mental illness or physical illness. Okay, Sam, all right, she's way in the back there. Okay.
Yes, I appreciate, Bernie, I appreciate you, love you, been following you for years. Moved to Vermont for you, actually, I know my senator.
Now we want you to move to New Hampshire, very good.
Okay, I'll have 1 foot over the bridge, I'll be here. I have a question about the environment. I really appreciate your commitment to it. You didn't mention agriculture. Animal agriculture in particular is one of the major contributors to environmental degradation and greenhouse gases. And my tax dollars, all of our tax dollars, are supporting a system that is unsustainable. We give subsidies to these monocrops, to land use, water use, and so on. And we don't support organic, local family farmers. What can we do?
I do. not all agriculture is going to be flipped overnight to be organic, that's for sure. But I'll tell you that in the state of Vermont, I'm not familiar, we have more dairy farms than we do in New Hampshire. But in Vermont now, about over 20% of our dairy production is organic. And that's been a significant increase over the years for a number of reasons. But I think, let me pick up on your question. I think all over this country, people are becoming increasingly concerned about the quality of the food they're eating and that they're giving to their kids. And I think you're seeing in Vermont, and I think in New Hampshire and throughout New England, other parts of this country, a significant growth in farmers markets, in support for local agriculture, where people really want to know the folks who are producing the food that they are eating. And that is something I absolutely and strongly support. Okay. Okay.
Hi. I agree with everything you say. What hasn't been addressed is, excuse the pun, the elephant in the room, and that is the wars in the Middle East.
All right, let me say thank you. All right, let me say a word on that. And you're right, it's a huge issue, and I can't touch on everything, so I'm happy to answer the questions. You are looking at somebody who, when he was elected to the Congress in 1991, one of my very first votes was whether or not to vote for the first Gulf War. I voted against that war in a minority. I said, I'll never forget, my wife and I often kid about this, said, well, Bernie, you're going to have a very short congressional career. Because, you know, people were supportive of the war. Years later, listening to Bush and Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld and all of these guys talk about Iraq, I caught on early that they weren't telling the truth. And not only did I vote against that war, I led the opposition to that war. It doesn't make me joyful to tell you that I recently saw, somebody may want to go to YouTube and look at the speech that I gave in opposition to that war. And sadly, much of what I said way back when, in trying to keep us from getting into that war, turned out to be exactly right. Okay? All right, so, and by the way, I was thinking ahead of my time on the deregulation of Wall Street as well. Didn't think that was a great idea either. All right, where are we now? We are in a very complicated and difficult situation. And I can say with absolute certainty that nobody has a magical answer. But this is my overview of the situation. This ISIS group is a barbaric group, and they've got to be defeated. But, and here is the but, it is beyond my comprehension why anybody thinks it has got to be the United States alone defeating them. It seems to me that after Iraq and Afghanistan, some people might begin to appreciate what we call unintended consequences. In terms of Iraq, you had Rumsfeld and Cheney saying, we're going to go in there, 6 months later, our troops will be back, we're going to install a stable democracy, everything will be nice. Didn't quite happen that way. All right, so in terms of what you got right now, this is what I think. I think you have a region, a lot of people don't talk about this, where you have countries like Saudi Arabia. I'll bet nobody in this room knows that Saudi Arabia has the third largest defense budget in the world. Do you know that? All right? Far more powerful than ISIS. Okay? You got Jordan, you got Turkey, you got countries in that region. And what we are looking at, really, in my view, is a struggle for the soul of Islam. And it seems to me that those countries in the region must lead the effort. We should be supportive. And I think the president is trying to be supportive. But at the end of the day, a Western Christian nation, I do not think, is going to win in that region. The people there themselves are going to have to do it. So, I will answer your question. I will do everything that I can to make certain that we are not involved in what some of my colleagues really want is perpetual warfare in the Middle East, more and more lives, more injuries, and huge amounts of money spent on those wars. Okay.
Thank you for talking about the quagmire that we are in. I'm concerned that no one has been held accountable for getting us in that. And I believe that war crimes and crimes against humanity have been committed by some of the leadership, torture, manipulation of intelligence, and so on. And I'm wondering how you will address that history, which might deter this kind of thing from happening again.
I think you raise a very, very fair question. I think it is important, and it's interesting hearing now and then people beginning to apologize for what happened. So I think we need to know a lot more. We have to be a lot more honest, and we do have to hold people accountable. But right now, in terms of the war and peace issue, my top priority is to make sure we are not involved in another war that never ends.
Hi, Bernie. I've been a supporter of yours for a long time. I grew up in Vermont. I've lived in New Hampshire a long time. We had a person here, Granny D, who and she had quite a campaign, almost beat Judd Gregg with, I think, $3,000. And one of the things she said was, as part of campaign finance reform, she would outlaw lobbyists. Where do you stand on that position?
Lobbyists play a horrendous role in Washington because the people who can afford the lobbyists are the very, very wealthiest people in this country. So I can't count to you or describe to you how many lobbyists come from Wall Street or come from major corporations. And clearly, the difficulty in answering your question is that if you went to visit me in Washington for a cause, for Alzheimer's, or for the needs of children, you could be a lobbyist as well. So we've got to think it through. But do I believe that billionaires and corporate America should have undue influence over the Congress? Absolutely not, and that is an issue that we've got to deal with. All right, maybe just a couple of more questions. Sam, where are you? Where'd Sam go? Okay, good.
Senator Sanders, in your revolution, would you support addressing the notion of 1 6-year presidential term, which was the Founding Fathers' original idea, and also term limits in the Senate and House?
The answer is no. And I'll tell you why. It may be conflict of interest here because I am in the Senate. I have 17 terms, but not really. Here's what I think. I think the more important issue is campaign finance reform. The more important issue, what you're really saying is the system is so corrupt that the only way we get rid of people is by, term limiting them out. When that happens, to go back to the question the woman just asked me a moment ago, the lobbyists end up having more power because everybody is new. And the lobbyists know the system and are more than happy to instruct new members. The real issue is to create a dynamic political system which prevents incumbents from raising 10 times more money than challengers. And then you'll have the turnover that the American people want.
Hi, you're great. Saw you at the pub a couple years ago. It was wonderful. I want to know about police accountability.
Good. Okay. Question is police accountability. Excellent and important question. And let me give you the bad news and the good news. The good news is that you are hearing more and more about that issue. The good news is you're hearing about Ferguson, you're hearing about Baltimore, you're hearing about New York City, you're hearing about elsewhere. The bad news is if you think that these issues have just occurred in the last year or two, you would be sorely mistaken. The truth is that for many, many decades, there have been situations where police officers have treated prisoners terribly, and in some cases absolutely unjustly kill them. All right, what do we have to do? We have to do a number of things. For a start, and maybe most importantly, we have to recognize, and I'm a former mayor, and I work very closely with the police. They have a tough job. And anyone thinks being a cop is an easy job is mistaken. It is a tough job. You got to respect them. They need to be well paid. They need to be well trained. But if a police officer does something wrong, and I think we saw that tape in South Carolina, right? And that police officer was indicted. Police officers, like anybody else, have got to be held accountable for their actions. If they break the law, they have got to be held accountable. The second issue, I am very concerned when you see the TV in Ferguson and elsewhere, where these police departments look like they are part of an army, an invading army, with all types of very heavy-duty military equipment. When I was mayor of Burlington, we worked hard to do what we call community policing. What community policing is about is it has, in a sense, it makes police officers part of the community so that they know the names of the people in the community, so that people trust them. So they're out there maybe playing ball with the kids. And when there's a problem in the community, they can go to the police officer. And that's what I would like to see all over this country. So we need efforts to integrate, in a sense, police officers into our community, to end this business about police officers being seen as oppressors. We need to help hold police officers accountable when they do illegal behavior, absolutely. And the other thing that we need to do, by the way, which is not talked about, is when you look at a town like Ferguson and everybody focused on police brutality, do you know what African-American youth unemployment in that town is? It's somewhere around 50%. And we're going to continue to have problems in this country if millions of kids cannot get jobs, cannot be involved in constructive activity. So all of those things are related. But at the end of the day, we are spending tens and tens of billions of dollars. We have more people in jail than any other country. And we're spending huge amounts of money on that. I would much prefer to invest in police training, good training, to invest in education, to invest in jobs for our young people. That is the best way to cut back. Listen, this is a great turnout, and you've asked great questions. And let me just conclude by saying what I said in the beginning. The political revolution is not me, it is you. And let's go forward together and transform this country. Let's win New Hampshire. Thank you all very much.